let us talk to Brendan Chilton, former Labour councillor and former chairman of Labour Leave, because one of the big stories today is the Bank of England itself saying that the budget has caused the economy to stagnate. Who would have thunk it, Brendan?
Well, good morning, Alex. May I be joining the chorus of happy birthday wishes for Boxing Day? And that's not me trying to delay answering your question. The Bank of England have obviously said that the economy is experiencing a lot of uncertainty at the moment because obviously we've got to see the impact of the budget. If the budget was only a few weeks ago, it's far too early to tell what the consequences of that are on the longer-term economic growth prospects of the country. We also face the prospect early in the new year, potentially of tariffs being imposed on this country by an incoming Trump administration. And so there's a huge amount of uncertainty. We also know that Russia is making advances into Ukraine, which is obviously impacting again on the supply chain of goods. And so while the Bank of England is absolutely right to highlight that at the moment the British economy is going through an unstable period, there are many, many reasons as to why that is the case.
But one of the big reasons, of course, was surely that budget. I mean, we had about, 3 months of doom-mongering coming from Sir Keir Starmer in the run-up to the budget. Oh, it's going to be difficult, tough decisions. That's not exactly going to roll out the red carpet for sort of foreign direct investment into the country, is it? And then, of course, you say it's too early to decide what effect the budget is going to have. But the thing is, when you're hearing from, say, even not that it necessarily directly affects the economy, but hospices, GP surgeries, SMEs saying that, they've done the maths and they're going to have to either not employ new people or potentially even let people go, then I think, that is an immediate effect. They know, they've done their accountancy. This is going to be a problem for them. That's the backbone of Britain. This budget, far from the promise of we're going to go for growth, this budget continues to scare anybody who might want to help see an uptick in the economy.
Well, we did have an enormous amount of foreign direct investment into the UK. I think this year we've been the third behind America and China. Now, returning to the budget itself, of course, no chancellor wants to increase taxes on businesses. No chancellor wants to increase taxes. The ideal world would be a low-tax economy where public spending is managed and where public services are doing well. Unfortunately, we're not in that position. Around the country, all you've got to do is look at our infrastructure, our public services, the amount of money we're spending on defence and other key areas. We just cannot, at the moment, afford where we are. And so the Chancellor has had to take this decision to put taxes up on employers. Now, as someone that is representing businesses, I would prefer that not to be the case. But there are only one or two taxes you can actually put in place that will raise the amount of revenue you would need to plug the gap in your budget. Those are employers' contributions. They are national insurance, VAT, and income tax. Now, in the election, the government promised that it would not put up taxes, income tax, VAT, and national insurance. And so the only other tax that was available was the employer's national insurance contribution. Now, while it's not very palatable, the Chancellor did say that this was a one-off budget. If you remember at the end of her statement in the House of Commons, she did say that we would not see a budget like this again. This was very specific to deal with this year's problems. And so hopefully in next year's budget and in the other fiscal events that will be happening, we will see other measures and perhaps more detailed on existing government policy to drive growth.
Well, who says that this year's problems aren't going to be next year's problems as well? I mean, it seems to me that a heck of a lot of money, they've come into power, and you can't blame the Labour Party, haven't been on the opposition benches for 3 terms, suddenly going, right, we're back in charge, we're going to do what we want to do, and being kind of excited and getting out of the box and going, right, let's do this thing, we're going to give pay rises to the public sector, and the Conservatives have said this could be inflationary, we can't do it right now, wouldn't it be great if everyone could get pay rises? But actually the reality of the situation is we're just not in a financial position to be able to do that. Oh no, said the Labour Party, we're going to do it. And then they turn around and go, yeah, let's go like hell for leather for net zero. Let's get Ed Miliband in charge of, the energy grid and throw 9 billion quid at Great British Energy. Aren't these all sort of vanity projects that if the wind was going the right way, in the right economic conditions, great. Do what you like. You're voted into power, put in place the policies you intend to do. But knowing, as you're saying, that we're in a difficult situation following the invasion of Ukraine, following global inflation, which hit everybody, frankly, after COVID. Now is not the time to be doing that stuff, especially not the net zero stuff, surely.
Well, I think just dealing with the first point on pay, of course, those were legacy decisions that the previous government kept pushing down the road, and they needed to be made. Many in the public sector haven't had a real increase in pay for many years. Of course, you've got to ask questions about whether that can be afforded. And I think one thing the government does need to do is to attach very significant reform to public services over the course of this parliament in exchange for those pay rises. And I know particularly the Health Secretary has said that there's got to be a radical transformation of the NHS. We need to see what that looks like. Now, in terms of net zero, I do think at the moment, while of course we all want to achieve energy security and we all want to achieve an energy system that doesn't harm the planet, we've got to be realistic about where we are in the world. We've got huge problems at the moment, not least, as you said, Alex, from the war in Ukraine. There's huge instability in the Middle East, and what impact that could have on the price of oil could yet unfold in the new year. We've got the issue of potential tariffs coming from America in the new year as well. And so I think a moment to look at where we are, look at where these risks are, and what policies we should and shouldn't be pursuing at pace in respect of net zero must be considered in the new year, particularly, as I say, with the threat of those tariffs coming from America in the new year.
Yeah, now we're going to pick up on that just after this. But guys, got some breaking news for you here. I don't believe it. Guess what's happened? Well, Mohammed Ahmad and Mohammed Ahmad, 20 and 25, they're the guys at Manchester Airport, remember? They have been charged. They've been charged. It's happened. They've finally been charged. They've been charged with actual bodily harm. That is following the disturbance at Manchester Airport involving police officers back in July. That's according to the Crown Prosecution Service. Well, they weren't particularly in a hurry to get that done. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. People have been going on for ages. Why hasn't this happened? Why have these two men not been charged yet? Well, now they have been. But I got to tell you, that means we can't talk about it anymore, because those be the rules. Once people have been charged, that means that journalists have to be very careful what they say, because we don't want to prejudice any forthcoming trial. Although, quite interesting, of course, that when those two with their spivvy little lawyer decided to sit down and do a sort of in their little suits and do a nice little interview. It was broadcast live on the BBC and Sky. Of course, that's before the charges, but I wonder how much that's going to prejudice the court case. But there you go, folks. Breaking news here at Talk. Mohammed Ahmad have now been charged with actual bodily harm after a disturbance at Manchester Airport involving police officers in July. It's a Christmas miracle! Right, let's go back to Brendan. And on the subject of Christmas miracles, I think we're going to kind of need one, aren't we? And Starmer's turned around and said he's got no regrets about any of the decisions he's made. Do you think, given his popularity ratings are really sort of like right at the bottom here, that he might do well in having a little bit, being a little bit more circumspect? And, you know, if he were to have regrets or were to question some of the policies he's put in place, might he look especially at things like the inheritance tax on farmers?
So, of course, the incoming Labour government has made decisions that have impacted on specific groups in society, farmers, pensioners, etc. They were tough decisions. They're not popular decisions. But I personally think, Alex, that a Prime Minister is not there to be popular. They're there to do what's right for the country and, yes, to take difficult and unpopular decisions. Some of our most successful Prime Ministers have been extremely unpopular, going back to...
I get that, Brendan, I know that. Look, I don't need a popularity contest for our Prime Ministers. I don't care if the Prime Minister is one of the most unpleasant people on the planet, as long as they have the country in good shape. The problem is with farmers, they've protested once, didn't they? There was a sort of, they all came down to Westminster. I've never seen so many barber jackets in one place in my life. And they've lobbied the government saying, look, these are the statistics. It's really going to impact on us. According to the Labour government, it's only going to make about 500 million quid. In terms of budget, that's coins down the back of the sofa. Still, the government was intransigent, and so they brought in a cavalcade of tractors. Quite a sight. And still the government's intransigent. So, without doubt, the farmers aren't just suddenly going to go, oh, well, never mind, we tried, we're not being listened to. The problem is, of course, if the farmers decided to, say, go on strike or blockade roads, we're going to be in a real mess. This is going to affect food on supermarket shelves.
Well, of course, we hope that the farmers don't do that. But just saying, as I was, Alex, there, I don't think prime ministers are there to be liked. They can make unpopular decisions. And if by the time of the next general election, the economy is growing, people feel as though they're better off, and some of the reforms that the government are talking about on public services, on planning, on industrial strategy, if those things start to seep through and people can see the pound in their pocket getting them more, the government will be re-elected.
But do you really think that the supposed 500 million quid that they're going to make on this inheritance tax on farmers is suddenly going to build a gazillion hospitals and make people feel the pounds in their pocket? I mean, it's just, to me, it is disproportionate. If they're honest, and I'm not sure they are honest, because they said, oh, it's not going to affect very many farms. Oh, it's only 500 million quid. You know, I'd say, well, why bother doing it? You know, it's really not one of those, a sum of money that is going to really move the needle a great deal, which makes me then think, well, it is going to affect far more farmers, as the NFU is saying, as DEFRA have suggested. And in that case, if they're going to say, oh, well, let's, you know, pander to the unions when it comes to public sector pay, what about the farmers? They're blimmin' important. If the argument is it comes down to what is best for the country, people not being able to buy food is a big issue. I mean, I just don't understand why this one, when they've seen the reaction, when they've actually had those statistics from DEFRA, which is the Whitehall department, saying, look, we actually think about, you know, 3/4 of farms could be affected by this. Why would they not go, do you know what, we've reviewed the figures and actually we're going to scrap the policy? That would have been a good idea, surely.
Well, of course, when this was announced, it was received by farmers very unfavourably. But if you look at most opinion polls, Alex, there is not a great deal of sympathy for changing this. People want to see everyone making their contribution via inheritance tax and all other taxes. Now, of course, in the grand scheme of things, the amount of money that will be raised by this tax will not be huge. And of course, many people can avoid this by transferring their estate to their children before they pass on. Now, of course, as you say, the sums raised are not massive, but it is a contribution. And if the government gave in to every opposition...
Yeah, but the disproportionate fallout, if farmers then decide to go on strike or do blockades, like, you know, they're not going to back down, are they? They're pretty hell-bent on being listened to. It's going to be a hugely disproportionate disadvantage from applying this policy and just going, do you know what, we've listened. We're in listening mode, we've heard you, we've seen all your tractors, we've been lobbied. We're going to reverse this. Brendan, look, thank you ever so much. I always love catching up with you, Brendan. Sensible man, actually, but Brexiteer to the heart. He was the chairman of Labour Leave. We worked together quite a lot back in those days.